The country called Kenya has a very rich history, which many a times has either been untold or been misrepresented. My name is Solomon Were. I invite you to take a journey with me as we retrace the Kenyan history through the eyes of first-hand witnesses in the name of Dr. Wanguhu and others.
Well, when I hear of Wanguhu, I remember the struggle for independence. And I know that Wanguhu is one of those people who were involved in the struggle for independence. And I also think of the role that the youth have played in the liberation of this country. At the height of it, that is in the early 60s, there was a very strong youth movement, which is called the Kan Youth Movement. Wanguhu was part of it. They're the group that eventually also trained out of the country in the Soviet Union. They came back and started the Lumumba Institute, which was being used to train the cadres to man different institutions after independence in the country.
But other than that, he has remained very steadfast in terms of fighting for greater democracy in this country. You also know that he has recently published a book on the Kenyan history. So he has remained very close to those things that will make Kenya a greater place to live in. And you cannot write the history of the second liberation in Kenya without Wanguhu.
For me, he's a real shuja. Those are people who should have been on the front line being celebrated by Kenyans. We have to really go back to those basics, because unless we know where we're coming from, we do not know where we're going.
He's done a lot. He was among the founders who brought in the multi-party. It was not easy. Like anything else, change or growth is uncomfortable. It was a very uncomfortable time for the country and especially for us as a family.
I remember later, in 1995 when I was in Form 4, and my dad actually sat me down and he told me, Waidera, I might be killed by the president, but just know, in case he does, I'm doing it for your children, your children's children, and your children's children's children.
He was very close to my father, the late Raila Odinga. The many things that they did together. There was a time when Wanguhu, people who carried what you call a coup in Cannes, and removed Tom Boyer, the Secretary General of the party. Okay. In those days when you had the left wing and the right wing of Cannes, that was a very critical moment. Okay.
The reason why I decided to document this film is to tell Kenyan history. And I selected Dr. Wanguhu as the main character because he has written a book on Kenyan history. And he's talking about communities sharing the same characteristics. I met him, he's talking about the same thing. I met Honorable Raila Odinga, and he's talking about Kenyans being one. This documentary will inform us our history and as well as living in unity as one people, because we are one people.
I think a lot of Kenya's history is unwritten, and the youth of this country are actually cheated because they don't get the real true information of what happened, what transpired, because we have not created institutions to help us to chronicle the stories as they happened. Unlike, say, a country like South Africa. South Africa set up an institution that helps the people who participated in the struggle to record their memoirs, their biographies, and so on.
I was born on 16 April 1939 at Kiambu Hospital.
As a young boy, after Jomo Kenyatta died, I was probably 1978. I was just about 9 years or something like that. 9 years actually. And after Kenyatta died, Wanguhu did a campaign for Gatundu, which was then one. The two Gatundu North and Gatundu South were then one constituency. And at that point, Wanguhu running for the seat of Gatundu MP. As a young boy, I was dazzled because he did part of his campaign from the air. And I remember small aircraft flying across Gatundu and dropping paper, which as young people we had imagined could have been something, something like a treasure. But I remember only discovering that it was his image. He did not win the election of 1978 after Kenyatta died. And probably it was because he was far removed from the people.
He cared so much for the country, thought about the country and development. And he would go to any length to fight, or he went to any length to fight for this country, especially for democracy. Even today he talks about democracy. He wants the country to be run democratically.
Well, when I hear of Wanguhu, I remember the struggle for independence. And I know that Wanguhu is one of those people who were involved in the struggle for independence. And I also think of the role that the youth have played in the liberation of this country. At the height of it, that is in the early 60s, there's a very strong youth movement, which is called the Kanu Youth Movement. Wanguhu was part of it. And they're the group that eventually also trained out of the country in the then Soviet Union. They came back and started the Lumumba Institute, which was being used to train the cadres to man different institutions after independence in the country.
He's one of the few Kenyans who are truly deserving of celebration for their contribution, both in the growth of Kenya as a young nation and subsequent development in this country. I first interacted with Wanguhu when I was fresh from the university. I was a young man. And during the course of my professional growth, he has been a very, very integral part of my growth in terms of my getting aware about politics in this country, of the earlier part of what used to go on in this country. And he is also my mentor. There's so many things I can say about what he did to me, but I can only say that I credit him with largely for who I am and what I've been able to achieve, both from what he impacted in my life as a role model, his advice, and like I said before, he's one among the Kenyans who are truly deserving of celebration. His contribution in this country and the development of this country, I'm afraid, is not well known which is something that should be corrected. We've talked a lot with him, and he used to tell me a lot about his life, how he started after finishing school. I got involved in the youth movement in this country prior to independence and immediately after independence. We have shared a lot. He told me how he went for studies in Bulgaria, and the people he went to study with, the way he traveled to Uganda, on to Cairo in Egypt, and onward to Bulgaria, where he studied. Of course, that was the time of the Cold War, when there was a struggle between the West and the East. And his alliance with the late Raila Odinga, how he came back to Kenya, how they tried to create a youth movement that, within the framework of the East-West competition, was being viewed suspiciously by most of the politicians in Kenya. And the fact that he clearly identified with Jaramogi, who was his mentor as well, that created a lot of suspicion on him and his activities. How he became the principal of the Lumumba Institute, and which is something he celebrates a lot, and most of the people who know him call him the vice chancellor, because it was supposed to be an institute where they were developing ideologies, young people in Kenya, and how that also was the beginning of the serious trade union movement.
Lumumba Institute was created by leaders including President Jomo Kenyatta, who was then the Prime Minister of Kenya. And it was not created to fight war. It was created to negotiate, talk, agree with Kenyans. And discussions were opened. Jomo Kenyatta was liberal, but very firm. And it is Kenyatta who had organized Mau. It is Kenyatta who organized the Lumumba Institute, and it is Kenyatta who closed the institute. Why? When it had already done its work, Kenyatta moved. Lumumba Institute was becoming another institution. You know, president is an institution. Do you know that? Another institution was rising. What had happened to Kanu? Even Kanu was given a kick because it was becoming too powerful, that it could have turned against Kenyatta. Currently, you have President Kenyatta. Kenyatta right now is playing game because the fellow who was president and is still president today is Jomo Kenyatta. And he may have had his thinking and plan, and he acted very wisely because he's never tried to do anything against the people. And when he wanted to do some things, he first organized his office of the Prime Minister, office of the President, and with officials who will negotiate, who will discuss, who will bring the information. He worked the country to the and why Kenyatta succeeded so much is because Kenyatta was pro people. And anything that went ahead, tried to open against the people's will, bring an explosion. Kenyatta was quick to stop it.
I think he's one of those people who have made tremendous contribution in shaping the future of our country. Independence and post-independence. I think his name will go down in history as a Kenyan patriot, national patriot, people who try to unite this country and to bridge the ethnic divide among our people.
So when I came to the university in 1990, I found myself embroiled in politics of the university first, but as soon as we had been unbanned by Moi, having operated only for a few months, we were banned again, and therefore it became very intense. And the students decided that one of their own needed to go to parliament because elections were being held in that year. This was a time that the politics was high octane politics because there was change taking place across the globe with communism collapsing and America pulling out of different areas and people feeling that they needed now to completely bring back a multi-party system in Kenya. And this is how I met Wanguhu Ng'ang'a as a student leader at the University of Nairobi, because he was contesting for the Westlands parliamentary seat. And it just happens that the university, after Sonu was banned, decides that they needed to take one of their students to parliament. And I happened to be that student that expressed willingness to run for Westlands parliamentary seat. So I met Wanguhu Ng'ang'a as a contestant of the same seat that he was contesting for. But as you know, students, being a student, I did not have the resources to be able to run a campaign. And I ended up actually helping Wanguhu Ng'ang'a more in terms of his campaign. And also when we came to counting votes, it was clear that I was not going to win because despite the fact that we had registered so many students to vote in Westlands, Daniel Arap Moi had closed the university 2 weeks before the elections, and therefore all my voters had gone back to what we then called Nyalgunga, the village. And as such, I did not anticipate to win, and I ended up helping Wanguhu Ng'ang'a in the counting of votes. I have no doubt that Wanguhu Ng'ang'a had genuinely won the election of 1992 in Westlands. But it was stolen in daylight, and there is nothing in those days that you could do. He fought very hard to, protect his win. But as it was common in those days, those who had the power because of the sheer force of the police and corrupt officials in the electoral process, the seat went to somebody else who genuinely did not win that election because that election had been won by Wanguhu Ng'ang'a.
It's a pity that the government and the people of Kenya have not really been able to be told the real heroes of this country. And it's my conviction that we need to know also where we are coming from and where we are going. It's a part of our history. And unless we know where we are coming from, we'll never know where we're going. And it is my very firm belief that both the intellectuals, the universities, the people who actually do serious research about history should be able to spare a chapter on these people, because it will help us to understand where we are coming from and where we are going. And we can only be better people, better citizens, because the example these people gave to this country, the self-sacrifice, their commitment to the ideals that make our country what it is what makes Kenya truly great.
I wish that people appreciate the roles that were played by people like Wanguhu. Okay? That time, you had here in Nairobi, of course, people like Yangi Mbaja. You had, of course, somebody like BFF Olwande Koduol, who started the Mumba Institute. You had people like Vicky Wachira, who were very strong and they played a very important role at that time. Gigi Kariuki played a role at that time. The Kanu youth was a very important organ. You can call it was the vanguard of the struggle at that time, because it what made a difference. Because the colonialists were using a lot of violence to try to intimidate the freedom fighters. The youth were all the time being arrested, locked up in police cells, sometimes taken to prison. That's a very critical time. So the people who made sacrifices, which need to be recognized.
I had good reason not to feel very well treated, having been very close and connected with Mau Mau operations. And after independence, involved in matters of the government, since the government was formed by a party that we belong to, KANU. And we supported it with all energy. And when we were ignored or taken back, you surely don't expect we were happy. But some of us did not go to the full length of rebelling. We showed our displeasure, but not a rebellion. And KANU was led by a lion, which was also a bull, or if you like, a bully. So Kenyatta was able to put to play objective, because he had a powerful personality. And that has enabled us to grow wings, to grow thorns, without causing a lot of problem. And that way, this country has become what it is. a peaceful country, a democratic country.